Amara Injeri moved before the sound registered. One moment, she was guiding Min-jae toward the sofa, reminding him gently to put his toys away. The next, the air split open. Not with noise at first, but with instinct. The kind that crawls up your spine and tells you something is terribly wrong. She didn't see the gunman clearly. She didn't need to. Amara only saw the child. She turned, wrapped her arms around Min-jae, and pulled him down with her just as the room erupted. The windows shattered inward. Security shouted. Somewhere nearby, someone screamed her name, but the sound came too late. She felt the impact as force, not pain. A hard, numbing blow that stole her breath. Then another. Then heat spreading where it shouldn't. Min-jae was crying beneath her, his small hands gripping her uniform like it was the only thing keeping the world from breaking apart. She held him tighter. The Kong residence, built to intimidate, guarded to perfection, collapsed into chaos in seconds. Armed men flooded the space. Furniture splintered. Glass rained down like ice. The protection Jun Suk Kong had paid fortunes for failed in the only moment that mattered. Amara had noticed the warning signs earlier that day. The unfamiliar car idling too long. The security guard who didn't meet her eyes. The quiet that felt wrong. She hadn't said anything. She never did. Invisible people learned to survive by staying quiet. But when violence came for the child she protected, silence wasn't an option. She felt herself growing cold as the noise blurred. Her thoughts drifted, not to fear but to relief. Min-jae was still breathing. Still alive. That was enough. Across the room, Jun Suk Kong turned and saw them. He saw blood where there shouldn't be blood. Saw his son alive where death had been waiting. And saw the maid he barely noticed lying over his child like a shield made of flesh and will. Something in him broke. The man known for control lost it. He crossed the room in a blur, dragging Amara away just enough to pull his son free. Min-jae clung to him, sobbing, pointing back at her. "She saved me," the boy cried. "She didn't let them take me." Jun Suk dropped to his knees beside Amara. "Stay with me," he said, the words rough, unfamiliar in his mouth. His hands shook as he pressed them against her wounds, useless against what was already slipping away. "Please, open your eyes." She did just once. Her gaze found his. Not fear. Not anger. Just quiet concern. "Is he safe?" she whispered. "Yes," Jun Suk said hoarsely. "Because of you." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. Then the sirens came. And the world held its breath. Because whatever happened next would change all of their lives. Amara Injeri learned early that the safest way to exist was quietly. In the Kong house, quiet had rules. Shoes aligned by the door before dawn. Curtains drawn at the same angle each morning. Tea brewed to the exact shade the boy liked. Light, with honey, never sugar. Amara followed those rules with the precision of someone who understood that attention could be dangerous. She moved through the halls like a shadow that cleaned, cooked, folded, and vanished before anyone thought to ask her name. She rose before the sun. When the house was still and the guards outside shifted with low murmurs she pretended not to hear. She cooked breakfast alone, humming softly in a language no one here understood. She kept her phone face down in her pocket, messages from home unread until night, because longing could slow her hands. And in this house, slow hands were noticed. Except by Min-jae. He noticed everything. He noticed when she cut the crusts off his toast without being asked. When she warmed his jacket before school on cold mornings. When she waited just outside the door during thunderstorms because she knew he didn't like being alone with the sound. He noticed the way her voice softened only for him. How she listened when he talked about dinosaurs or dreams or the mother he barely remembered. To Min-jae, Amara wasn't invisible. She was solid, constant. Sometimes, when the house felt too large and too quiet, he would follow her into the kitchen and sit at the small table meant for staff, swinging his legs while she worked. She never told him to leave. She never told him he didn't belong there. She would hand him a piece of fruit, cut into neat shapes, and let him talk until the tightness left his shoulders. "Do you ever get scared?" he asked her once, tracing circles on the table with his finger. Amara had paused, knife still in her hand. "Yes," she said gently. "But being scared doesn't mean you stop caring." Min-jae thought about that for a long moment. Then he nodded like it was something important he intended to remember. Jun-suk-kong rarely saw these moments. When he did see Amara, it was in passing. Head lowered, movements efficient, presence unremarkable. He approved of her because she caused no problems. She didn't ask questions. She didn't linger. She didn't try to matter. In his world that made her ideal. Amara preferred it that way. She had learned long before Seoul, long before the Kong house, that visibility invited loss. That love, when seen by the wrong people, could be used like a blade. So she folded herself smaller and kept her care focused where it was safest, on a child who needed it and could not weaponize it. Min-jae trusted her completely. He held her hand when they crossed the courtyard. He slept better when she sat nearby, reading quietly while he drifted off. When nightmares woke him, it was Amara he called for, not the guards outside his door, not the father who ruled entire districts but struggled with bedtime stories. Amara never replaced anyone. She never claimed more than she was given. But she showed up every day, in small ways that added up to something steady. She remembered his favorite color changed weekly. She learned which days he needed space and which days he needed stories. She taught him how to breathe slowly when fear made his chest tight, counting softly until his hands stopped shaking. And when Min-jae smiled, really smiled, something warm stirred in her chest that she quickly pressed down. Hope was dangerous. Attachment even more so. She told herself she was temporary. All things were. That afternoon the house felt wrong. Amara noticed it while folding laundry. The quiet wasn't peaceful, it was thin, brittle. She moved to the windows and saw a car parked where it didn't belong. She told herself it was nothing. She always told herself that. Survival had trained her to doubt her instincts just enough to stay employed. Min-jae was playing in the living room, blocks scattered at his feet, humming to himself. Amara watched him longer than usual. 5 more minutes, she said softly, and he nodded, obedient and trusting. She didn't know why her chest felt tight. She didn't know why she moved closer to him, why she placed herself just a little between his small body and the wide glass windows. She only knew one thing for certain. If something came for him, it would have to go through her first. And for the woman no one saw, that felt like the most natural thing in the world. The house reflected Jun-suk-kong perfectly. Tall walls, clean lines, cameras tucked neatly into corners where they could see without being seen. Guards rotated shifts with military precision, faces blank, loyalty purchased and reinforced through fear as much as money. Every door required a code. Every window was reinforced. Even the garden was designed to look welcoming while leaving nowhere to hide. Jun-suk had built it that way because he understood the truth of his world. Beauty was a distraction, and safety was always an illusion. Inside those walls, he ruled with the same discipline he used to command his empire. Meetings began on time. Voices stayed low. Mistakes were not repeated. Men who disappointed him learned quickly that apologies were useless without results. In the underworld, his name carried weight not because he was loud or cruel for sport, but because he was absolute. He did not threaten. He decided. And people lived or didn't according to those decisions. To his enemies, Jun-suk-kong was untouchable. To his allies, reliable and cold. To the city, a ghost whose influence was felt but never openly acknowledged. He owned businesses that employed thousands and networks that moved things no one wanted traced. He kept his hands clean while the world beneath him stayed dirty. Fear did the rest. The only place fear was not allowed to show was in front of his son. Min-jae was the single exception in Jun-suk's carefully controlled life. The one thing not negotiated, not hardened, not sharpened into a weapon. From the moment the boy was born, Jun-suk had built everything around him. Layers of security, distance from rivals, silence where questions might grow dangerous. Love to Jun-suk meant protection, meant walls, guards, distance, did not mean warmth. He watched his son from afar more often than he held him close. He justified it as necessity. Better Min-jae grow up safe and slightly lonely than exposed and dead. The boy had tutors, toys, schedules. Everything a child could need except a parent who lingered. When Jun-suk passed through the house, conversations stopped. Staff bowed their heads. Even the air seemed to tighten, as if the walls themselves were listening. He noticed everything that mattered: security reports, inventory logs, unfamiliar faces. He did not notice the maid. Amara Injeri existed at the edge of his awareness, filed mentally under handled. She caused no disturbances. She followed instructions. She stayed where she was placed. That was enough. In his world, reliability without curiosity was the highest praise. He knew she took care of Min-jae. That mattered. He saw his son calmer than he used to be, sleeping better, asking fewer questions that Jun-suk didn't have answers for. The improvement registered, and Jun-suk approved it the way he approved a successful operation. Efficient, effective, replaceable if necessary. He never asked how she did it. If he had looked closer, he might have noticed the way Min-jae leaned toward her instead of the guards. The way the boy's shoulders relaxed when she entered a room. The way he reached for her hand without thinking. But Jun-suk Kong did not look for softness. He had buried his own too deeply to recognize it in others. The world he controlled did not allow for it. Enemies were restless. Alliances shifted quietly. Information moved faster than loyalty. Somewhere beyond his walls, someone was always calculating his weaknesses. Jun-suk stayed ahead by never pretending he didn't have any. Min-jae was the only one that mattered. That knowledge kept him awake at night. It was why he trusted no one fully. Why he kept his son close but emotionally guarded. Why the house felt less like a home and more like a fortress holding its breath. That afternoon, Jun-suk stood in his office reviewing reports when a faint unease stirred. Nothing specific. Just a subtle imbalance. A sense that something had shifted without his permission. He dismissed it. Fear was a tool, not a feeling he indulged. Downstairs, Min-jae laughed softly as his blocks fell over. Amara smiled and helped him rebuild. The house carried on, silent and watchful, unaware that the walls Jun-suk trusted were about to prove their limits. In a world built on fear, it was never the strongest who survived the longest. It was the ones willing to stand in front of what mattered most. And Jun-suk Kong was about to learn that the most dangerous thing in his house was not an enemy, but a woman he had never truly seen. The sound that shattered the afternoon wasn't loud at first. It was sharp, whunk, like glass snapping under pressure. Amara felt it before she understood it. The way her skin prickled, the way Min-jae froze mid-laugh, the way the air itself seemed to pull tight. She was already moving when the first explosion hit the windows. The living room erupted. Glass burst inward in a spray of light and sound. Alarms screamed. The world fractured into motion and noise as men poured through the breach, their movements fast and deliberate, faces hidden, weapons raised. The guards shouted commands that overlapped and dissolved into chaos. Somewhere close someone fell. Min-jae screamed. Amara didn't think. There was no space for fear, no time for choice. Her body reacted the way it had been trained to, by instinct shaped through loss and survival. She turned, wrapped her arms around the child, and pulled him down with her, her back to the threat, her whole body becoming a shield. The impact came hard. Not pain at first, just force, like being shoved from behind by something enormous and unforgiving. Her breath vanished. The floor rushed up to meet her knees as she curled around Min-jae, tucking his head into her chest, one hand cradling the back of his skull. More shots followed, deafening now. The sound tore through the room, bounced off the walls, lodged in her ears until everything else blurred. She felt heat spread across her back, her shoulder, a sharp burn that made her jaw clench but did not loosen her grip. Min-jae was shaking violently beneath her. "I've got you," she whispered, though she wasn't sure he could hear her over the noise. I've got you. Stay still. His fingers dug into her uniform, desperate, crushing. She welcomed the pain of it. It meant he was alive. It meant she was still doing what she needed to do. Around them, the house Jun Suk Kong had fortified so carefully was failing. Furniture splintered. Smoke filled the air. The guards were fighting back now, gunfire answering gunfire, but the moment had already been stolen. The illusion of control had shattered as easily as the glass. Amara's vision wavered. She focused on Min-jae's breathing. Small, uneven, but there. She counted silently with him, the way she always did when fear crept in. 1, 2, 3. Stay with me. Another blow struck her, glancing, sending a sharp jolt down her spine. This time, pain bloomed fully, white and overwhelming, stealing a sound from her throat before she could stop it. She tightened her arms instead, pressing Min-jae closer, making herself smaller, wider, whatever she needed to be to keep him covered. This was fine, she told herself distantly. This was enough. Across the room, Jun Suk Kong turned at the sound of his son's scream. For one suspended second, everything slowed. He saw the intruders, the smoke, the guards, and then he saw them. His son on the floor, hidden beneath the maid he barely noticed, her body curved around Min-jae like a living barrier. Blood was spreading across the pale floor. Something inside Jun Suk snapped. He moved with a speed that startled even his own men. Orders barked, shots fired with cold precision. One attacker fell. Then another. The rest scattered, retreating the way predators did when they realized they had miscalculated. But Jun Suk wasn't watching them anymore. He was on his knees beside Amara, hands already searching, uselessly, for wounds he didn't want to acknowledge. He pulled her just enough to free his son, lifting Min-jae into his arms without taking his eyes off her face. "Daddy!" Min-jae sobbed, clinging to him. She. "I know," Jun Suk said hoarsely. His voice didn't sound like his own. "I know." Amara's eyes fluttered open. The world felt distant, like she was underwater. Sounds came muffled, warped. She focused on the shape in front of her, the man she rarely saw this close. His face tight with something she didn't recognize. "Is he safe?" she asked. The words felt heavy. Jun Suk swallowed hard. "Yes," he said. "Because of you." A faint smile touched her lips. Relief softened her features in a way that made something twist painfully in his chest. She tried to move her hand. It barely lifted, but it reached him anyway, fingers brushing his sleeve as if to reassure him. "That's good," she whispered. Then her gaze drifted, unfocused. Her body slackened. "No," Jun Suk said sharply, one hand gripping hers. "Stay with me. Open your eyes. Don't you dare close them." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Guards shouted updates he didn't hear. All he could see was the woman bleeding on his floor and the space she had stood in front of without hesitation. Min-jae leaned forward in his arms, crying. "Please," the boy said, his voice breaking. "She saved me." Jun Suk held his son tighter and looked down at Amara in Jerry, the woman no one saw until she became the only thing standing between his child and death. And as the house filled with emergency lights and rushing footsteps, Jun Suk Kong understood one terrifying truth. Nothing in his world would ever be the same again. The hospital hallway smelled like antiseptic and fear. Everything moved too fast and not fast enough at the same time. Amara was rushed past bright lights and swinging doors. Her body lifted from Jun Suk's arms by hands that spoke in clipped voices and urgent tones. Machines beeped. Wheels rattled. Someone called out numbers that blurred together. Jun Suk followed until he was forced to stop. The doors closed between them with a finality that felt like a verdict. He stood there, frozen, Min-jae pressed against his chest, both of them streaked with blood that didn't belong to either of them. His suit, tailored, immaculate, chosen carefully that morning, was ruined. He barely noticed. He could still feel Amara's weight in his hands, the way she had gone slack, the faint warmth that had been leaving her too quickly. "Daddy!" Min-jae whispered, his voice thin. Is she going to wake up? Jun-suk opened his mouth. No words came. A nurse approached cautiously, eyes flicking to his face, then to the child clinging to him. Sir, she said gently, we need to take him to get cleaned up. Min-jae shook his head violently, arms tightening. No, I want to stay. She'll be scared if I'm not here. Jun-suk felt something crack again, quietly this time deeper. She won't be alone, he said, more to himself than to his son. He shifted Min-jae just enough to look at him. I promise you, I won't let her be alone. The boy nodded, trusting him completely, and that trust landed like a weight on Jun-suk's chest. They sat together on a hard plastic bench outside the operating room. Time stretched. Minutes became something shapeless and cruel. Jun-suk did not check his phone. He ignored the messages piling up, the calls from men who wanted instructions, explanations, permission to act. For the first time in years, he did not care about control. Min-jae eventually fell asleep against him, exhaustion overtaking fear. Jun-suk adjusted his grip carefully, afraid to move too much, afraid to do anything that might change the fragile balance of the moment. He stared at the closed doors and replayed the scene over and over. Amara's body folding around his son, the way she hadn't hesitated, the calm in her eyes when she asked if Min-jae was safe. She had not asked about herself. June arrived quietly, stopping a few steps away. He took in the scene, the blood, the stillness, the way Jun-suk's gaze never left the doors, and said nothing at first. Sir, he said eventually low. The attackers are gone. We're confirming details. Jun-suk nodded once, without looking at him. June hesitated. The doctors said. It's serious. I know, Jun-suk replied. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. There was something in the way he said it that made June straighten, a recognition that whatever came next would not be business as usual. Hours passed. The hallway quieted as the night deepened. Staff moved more softly now, footsteps muted, voices lowered out of habit or respect. Jun-suk stood only when his legs began to ache too badly to ignore, pacing once, twice, then stopping again in front of the doors. When the surgeon finally emerged, his face was tired but composed. Jun-suk was there instantly. She's alive, the doctor said. The words hit like air after drowning. Jun-suk closed his eyes briefly, his hand tightening on Min-jae's back. He hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. She lost a lot of blood, the doctor continued. The next day will be critical, but she fought hard. Jun-suk nodded again. Can I see her? Briefly, the doctor said. She's unconscious. They led him into a quiet room filled with machines and low, steady sounds. Amara lay still beneath white sheets, her skin pale, her features drawn but peaceful in a way that felt undeserved after what she had endured. She looked smaller here. Jun-suk stood at her bedside, unsure what to do with his hands until one reached out on its own and rested lightly near hers, not quite touching. He watched her chest rise and fall and felt something unfamiliar settle in his bones. Furious, but also something else. Resolve. Min-jae stirred and leaned closer, his small fingers brushing Amara's hand. She's still here, he whispered, as if saying it softly would help make it true. Yes, Jun-suk said. She is. He looked down at the woman who had stepped into Gunfire without hesitation, who had protected his son when all his power had failed him. In the quiet of the hospital room, surrounded by machines and promises he wasn't sure how to keep yet, Jun-suk Kong understood that the blood spilled in his house had followed him here, and it had changed the shape of everything. Jun-suk did not leave the hospital. He sent Min-jae home with 2 guards he trusted and a promise that he would come as soon as Amara woke up. The boy resisted at first, eyes red and swollen, but exhaustion won. Jun-suk watched them disappear down the corridor and felt the space beside him widen, cold and accusing. When the door to Amara's room closed again, silence returned. It was then that he called June. Find out who she is, Jun-suk said quietly. Everything. June did not ask why. He never did. He nodded once and left, footsteps receding down the hallway like a countdown. Jun-suk sat in the chair beside Amara's bed and studied her face. Without blood and chaos, she looked younger, softer, ordinary in a way that felt deceptive now. He noticed things he hadn't before: the faint scar near her hairline, the calluses on her fingers, the calm stillness even in unconsciousness, as if rest itself was something she had learned to ration. She had known what to do. That was the thought that wouldn't leave him. Not panic, not luck. She had moved with certainty, with an understanding of angles and timing that guards trained for years had failed to match. That kind of instinct came from somewhere. It was forged. June returned before dawn with a tablet and a look Jun-suk recognized immediately. Surprise, respect, something close to unease. Her name is Amara Injeri, June said softly. She's 29. Born in Nairobi. Came to Korea 8 months ago through a domestic placement agency. Jun-suk waited. Her father, June continued, was a logistics coordinator. Not officially. He worked in the gray spaces. Convoys. Private shipments. Sometimes things that didn't want to be found. Jun-suk's gaze sharpened. Dangerous work. Yes, sir. He was killed 3 years ago. Targeted. The investigation stalled. Amara disappeared shortly after. Jun-suk looked back at the woman in the bed. The pieces began to align. She trained as a nurse, June said. Emergency response. Trauma basics. She never finished her final certification. After her father's death, she moved constantly. No fixed address for nearly 2 years. Why come here? Jun-suk asked. June hesitated. To disappear. She took work that wouldn't attract attention. Places where no one asked questions. She sent most of her earnings home to support extended family. Jun-suk exhaled slowly. Invisible by design. She also has informal self-defense training, June added. Situational awareness. Risk assessment. Nothing official. Likely learned through experience. Experience earned the hard way, Jun-suk thought. June lowered his voice. Sir, she's not weak. No, Jun-suk agreed. She never was. He looked down at Amara again, seeing her now with clarity that bordered on regret. She had carried her history quietly, folded into herself so completely that he had mistaken restraint for insignificance. She understood what was happening before anyone else, he said. That's why she moved. June nodded. Yes, sir. A long pause settled between them. If word gets out that she survived, June said carefully, she'll be at risk. Whoever ordered the hit won't ignore a witness. Especially one tied to you now. Jun-suk's jaw tightened. I won't let that happen, he said. June studied him. How? Jun-suk didn't answer immediately. His gaze stayed on Amara, on the steady rise and fall of her chest, the quiet strength that had carried her through a life designed to break people. I've protected people with walls and weapons my entire life, he said finally. It wasn't enough. June waited. She needs more than guards, Jun-suk continued. More than distance. She needs a place where no one would dare touch her. June's eyes widened slightly as understanding dawned. Sir. Jun-suk stood, straightening his jacket with the same precision he used before difficult decisions. She stepped into Gunfire for my son. That creates a bond my world understands. June swallowed. A blood debt. Yes, Jun-suk said. And blood debts are honored. He reached out and finally took Amara's hand. His grip steady, deliberate. Not ownership. Protection. She spent years surviving by being unseen, he said. That ends now. June nodded slowly. I'll make the necessary arrangements. Discreetly, Jun-suk added. Until I say otherwise. June turned to leave, then paused. Sir, when she wakes up. Jun-suk looked down at Amara, something unguarded flickering across his face. When she wakes up, he said, she won't have to run anymore. The machines hummed softly around them. Dawn crept pale and quiet through the window. And for the first time since the bullets shattered his house, Jun Suk Kong felt certain of one thing. The woman everyone had overlooked was stronger than anyone in his world had ever imagined. Jun Suk had built his life on transactions. Favors returned. Threats honored. Money exchanged for silence, loyalty, distance. Every problem had a cost. And every cost had a solution if you were powerful enough to pay it. That belief had carried him from nothing to everything. It failed him the moment Amara stepped in front of the Gunfire. He stood alone now in the private waiting room just outside her suite, phone pressed to his ear, issuing orders with the calm efficiency that had once defined him. More guards. New rotations. A secure vehicle on standby. A temporary safe house prepared within the hour. The words came easily, automatically. When he ended the call, the room felt emptier. He looked through the glass at Amara lying still beneath clean white sheets, machines quietly measuring what the bullets had tried to take. She was alive. Barely. And already, his world was circling her like a threat. June's warning echoed in his mind. Whoever ordered the attack would not forget her. They wouldn't see a maid. They would see a loose end. A witness. A weakness. Jun Suk knew how men like that thought. He had been one of them once. Money could hire protection, but it could not erase attention. Guards could keep someone alive, but they could not give them peace. Safe houses worked until they didn't. Distance was only useful if you could keep running forever. Amara had spent years doing exactly that. He thought of what June had said, that she had come to Korea to disappear. That she had chosen a life of invisibility not because she lacked strength, but because she understood the cost of being seen. And yet, when it mattered, she had not hidden. She had chosen to be visible, to be present, to be the barrier between a child and death. That kind of act shattered the rules Jun Suk lived by. He returned to her bedside quietly and sat down, elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped together like he was bracing himself for impact. He studied her face, searching for answers she could not give him yet. "You didn't do it for reward," he said softly, unsure why he spoke aloud. "You didn't even do it for me." She had done it because Min-jae was small and afraid and trusted her. Because someone needed to act. Because that was who she was. Jun Suk closed his eyes, a rare gesture of surrender. In his world, debts were measured in blood or power. But what did you give someone who had saved your child without hesitation? What currency could balance that scale? He had already decided to keep her safe. That was not in question. But safety was not the same as security. And security was not the same as belonging. As long as Amara was an employee, she could be dismissed. As long as she was a guest, she could be removed. As long as she existed outside his name, she remained vulnerable to anyone willing to challenge him quietly. He opened his eyes again, resolve settling like armor. Protection without elevation was meaningless. June entered a moment later, reading the expression on Jun Suk's face before a word was spoken. "Sir," he said cautiously, "the council is asking questions. Rumors are already moving." "Let them," Jun Suk replied. June hesitated. "If this is about keeping her safe, we can." "No," Jun Suk cut in, his voice steady. "You're thinking too small." June straightened. "Sir." Jun Suk stood and looked down at Amara one last time before turning fully to him. "Guards can be bribed. Houses can be breached. Silence can be bought. I won't gamble her life on temporary solutions." June's brow furrowed as understanding began to form. "You're saying..." "I'm saying that as long as she stands alone, she will always be a target," Jun Suk said. "And as long as she is a target, my son is not truly safe." The words felt heavy, final. June swallowed. "That kind of protection comes with consequences." "Yes," Jun Suk agreed. "And I accept them." He glanced back at Amara, something softer threading through his determination. "She didn't choose this world. But it chose her anyway. I won't let it destroy her the way it destroys everything else." June exhaled slowly. If you do this, there's no reversing it. Jun-suk met his gaze. Good. Outside the window, the city stirred with the first signs of morning. Life continuing, indifferent to the quiet war being decided inside a hospital room. Jun-suk Kong had spent his life believing power was about control. Now he understood the truth. Power was about what you were willing to bind yourself to. And for a debt that could never be repaid with money or force, there was only one answer left. Jun-suk made the decision before the sun finished rising. It settled into him with a clarity he trusted, the same clarity that had guided every ruthless choice he'd ever made. This one felt different, heavier but no less certain. He didn't pace. He didn't hesitate. He stood by Amara's bed, watched the steady rise of her chest, and accepted the truth that had been forming since the moment he saw her blood on his floor. Temporary protection would fail her. Anything reversible would invite danger. He turned and called June. I need the lawyer, Jun-suk said. Now. June's pause was barely a breath. Sir, for what purpose? For something that cannot be undone. June arrived with attorney Han less than an hour later. The man looked tired, hair still damp from a rushed shower, eyes sharp with concern as he took in the hospital room, the guard stationed outside, the unconscious woman in the bed. This is highly unusual, Han said carefully. So is my world, Jun-suk replied. Sit. They spoke in low voices. Legal frameworks. Emergency authority. Witnesses. Consequences. Han outlined risks without flinching, because he knew his client well enough to understand when caution was ceremonial. This will bind her to you, Han said at last. Publicly. Permanently. That's the point. June watched, face unreadable, as the shape of the decision became undeniable. Sir, he said quietly, the council will react. They always do, Jun-suk said. They'll survive. And if she refuses when she wakes? Jun-suk's gaze flicked back to Amara. His voice softened just slightly. Then I'll hear her. But she won't face this world alone. The documents were prepared swiftly. Witnesses arranged. Discretion maintained, though nothing this final could ever remain truly hidden. Word would spread. It always did. By noon, whispers would be moving through channels that never slept. Before they began, Jun-suk went to fetch Min-jae. The boy walked into the room quietly, eyes widening when he saw the papers, the lawyer, the seriousness etched into his father's face. He climbed onto the chair beside Amara and took her hand carefully, as if afraid she might break. Is she still sleeping? He asked. Yes, Jun-suk said. But she can hear us. Sometimes people can. Min-jae nodded solemnly. He leaned closer to Amara and whispered, I'm here. I didn't go anywhere. Something in Jun-suk's chest tightened. When everything was ready, the room fell silent. Jun-suk stepped forward. He did not kneel. He did not perform. He stood as he always did, straight-backed, unyielding, a man accustomed to being obeyed. But his eyes never left Amara's face. This woman saved my son, he said clearly. She saved my future. From this moment forward, she will be protected as such. The words were simple. The meaning was not. The papers were signed. Witnesses confirmed. The final seal was placed with a sound that felt louder than it should have been. It was done. Min-jae smiled, wide and bright, the fear in his eyes finally loosening its grip. She's family now, he said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Yes, Jun-suk agreed. She is. He moved closer to the bed and gently took Amara's hand, sliding a ring onto her finger. Plain, understated, unmistakable. Not a display. Declaration. I won't let anyone hurt you again, he said quietly, words meant for her alone. Not ever. Outside the room, June exhaled slowly, the weight of what they'd done settling in. Sir, he said, this will change everything. Jun-suk didn't look away from Amara. It already has. The decision rippled outward immediately, through guards who straightened at the sight of the ring, through calls that stopped mid-sentence, through men who understood power well enough to recognize when it had shifted shape. The maid was no longer invisible. She was untouchable. And as the city continued its restless hum beyond the hospital walls, Jun Suk Kong stood beside the woman who had stepped into Gunfire without hesitation and accepted the truth he could no longer deny. Some debts did not end with payment. They ended with allegiance. The first whisper started before Amara opened her eyes. It moved through channels that never slept. Quiet phone calls, pauses in conversation, men lowering their voices when a certain name was mentioned. By mid-morning, it had spread far beyond the hospital walls, reshaping alliances with nothing more than implication. Jun Suk Kong had made a move no one expected. The council convened without being formally called. Senior figures who rarely agreed on anything found common ground in shock. Maid. Foreigner. A woman no one had noticed until she became impossible to ignore. Some were offended. Others were wary. All of them were paying attention. Jun Suk felt it immediately. The subtle shift in how people spoke to him, the careful neutrality layered over deference. He was still powerful, still feared. But curiosity had entered the space where certainty used to live. Power had changed shape. At the hospital, security doubled, then tripled. Not because Jun Suk ordered it, but because no one wanted to be the one who failed to take the situation seriously enough. Guards stood straighter. Nurses moved more carefully. Even the air felt charged, like something volatile had been introduced into a controlled environment. Amara lay at the center of it all, unaware. Jun Suk sat beside her bed, his presence unyielding. He hadn't slept. He didn't intend to. Every now and then, he caught himself watching the door, calculating threats that hadn't yet taken form. It was instinct now, expanded, sharpened, redirected. June entered quietly, closing the door behind him. "The news is out," he said. "Not officially. But it's everywhere that matters." Jun Suk nodded. "And some see it as weakness," June continued. "Others see it as a warning." "And you?" June hesitated. "I think you've made her too important to ignore." "That was always going to happen," Jun Suk replied. June stepped closer, lowering his voice. "There will be challenges. People who want to see if this new line you've drawn is real." Jun Suk glanced at Amara's hand resting in his, the ring catching the light. "Let them test it." The first test came sooner than expected. A message arrived from an old rival, carefully worded, polite, dangerous in its restraint. "Congratulations. An unexpected choice. We hope she understands the responsibility that comes with your name." Jun Suk read it once, then deleted it. "She will," he said quietly. Min Jae arrived later that afternoon, escorted by guards who treated the hospital room like sacred ground. He moved straight to Amara's side, climbing carefully onto the chair, his small fingers finding hers with practiced ease. "She hasn't woken up yet," he said, not a question. "Not yet," Jun Suk replied. Min Jae nodded. He was quieter now, older somehow. Trauma had a way of compressing childhood. "When she does," he said after a moment, "will she be scared?" Jun Suk considered the question seriously. "Maybe," he said. "But she won't be alone." That seemed to satisfy the boy. He leaned his head gently against the bed and closed his eyes. Outside, the world adjusted. Employees at the Kong residence were summoned and reminded, politely, firmly, that Amara was no longer staff, that she was to be addressed differently, treated differently, protected differently. Some were confused. Few were resentful. All of them complied. The maid had become Mrs. Kong. And with that name came weight. It also came danger. June returned that evening with fresh intelligence. "There's movement," he said. "Nothing direct yet. But people are repositioning. Watching." "They always were," Jun Suk said. "Now they're just being honest about it." He stood and looked down at Amara, something protective hardening behind his eyes. "Anyone who comes for her," he continued, "comes for me." June nodded. Understood. Later, when the room was quiet again, Jun-suk leaned closer to Amara and spoke softly, as if she might hear him through the haze of medication and healing. You didn't ask for this, he said. I know that. But the moment you stepped in front of that gunfire, you changed the board. For both of us. He brushed his thumb gently against her knuckles, grounding himself in the contact. A new name makes you visible, he continued. It makes you powerful. It also makes you a target. The machines hummed steadily. Amara didn't stir. Jun-suk straightened, resolve settling back into place. I will teach them, he said, more to the world than to her, that you are not the weakness they think you are. Outside the hospital, Seoul moved on, cars passing, lights flickering on as evening fell. Somewhere in that vast, watchful city, eyes turned toward a woman who had once lived unseen. She had a new name now, and everyone wanted to know what it would cost to say it out loud. Amara woke to quiet. Not the comforting quiet of early morning, but the careful kind. The kind shaped by machines humming softly, by footsteps that knew when not to linger. Her first breath felt shallow, borrowed. Her body ached in places she couldn't immediately name. Pain dulled to a distant throb that pulsed with her heartbeat. She opened her eyes. White ceiling. Dim lights. A window casting pale afternoon glow across unfamiliar walls. Hospital. Memory rushed back in fragments. Glass breaking, Min-jae's scream, the instinctive pull of his small body against hers. The sound of gunfire slammed into her chest harder than the pain did. Her breath caught. She tried to move. A sharp flare of pain answered, stealing the effort from her muscles. She winced, heart racing, and that was when she realized she wasn't alone. Jun-suk Kong was sitting beside her bed. Not standing. Not distant. Sitting close enough that his knee brushed the frame. His jacket discarded. His expression stripped of the control she remembered. He looked tired, worn. Like a man who hadn't allowed himself rest because rest required trust. You're awake, he said quietly. His voice anchored her. Amara swallowed, throat dry. Min-jae, she whispered. The name came out first, unfiltered. Urgent. Is he? He's safe, Jun-suk said immediately. Because of you. Relief hit her so hard it hurt. Her eyes closed briefly, a single tear slipping free before she could stop it. She nodded faintly, as if that was all she had needed to hear. When she opened her eyes again, she noticed the details she couldn't ignore now. The extra guards outside the door, the tension in the air, the way Jun-suk watched her like she might disappear if he looked away. Something was wrong. Why am I here so long? She asked softly. How bad was it? Jun-suk hesitated. Just enough. You were injured, he said carefully. But you're recovering. The doctors are optimistic. She searched his face. That's not all. No, he admitted. Amara shifted her gaze, and that was when she saw it. The ring. Simple. Elegant. Resting on her finger like it belonged there. Her heart stuttered. She stared at it, confusion spreading, cold and sharp. That's not mine, she said. Her voice was steady, but only because she forced it to be. Jun-suk inhaled slowly. It is now. Silence stretched between them, fragile and electric. What does that mean? She asked. It means, he said evenly, that you're no longer alone in this world. Amara's mind raced, instinct screaming. I didn't agree to anything. I know. Her eyes snapped back to his, fear flickering for the first time since she woke. Then why? Because they will come for you, Jun-suk said, the words blunt, stripped of comfort. Whoever ordered the attack knows you survived. In my world, witnesses don't get second chances. Her chest tightened. She had known this was coming. Somewhere deep down, she had always known that stepping in front of those bullets would cost her more than blood. You could have hidden me, she said quietly. Sent me away. And you would have spent the rest of your life running, he replied. That's not protection. That's another prison. She looked away, jaw tightening. You don't get to decide my life for me. No, he said. But I get to decide who they can't touch. Her gaze returned to him, sharper now. And what am I to you? Jun-suk didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was lower. Honest in a way it hadn't been before. You are the woman who saved my son when everything I built failed him. Amara absorbed that slowly. And now, he continued, you carry my name. That makes you powerful. It also makes you a target. There it was. The truth she had lived with her entire life, spoken plainly. She let out a slow breath. I never wanted this. I know, Jun-suk said. Neither did I. Their eyes held. Something unspoken passed between them, recognition perhaps. Two people shaped by violence, standing at the edge of something neither had planned. Outside the door, footsteps approached. June appeared briefly, expression tense. Sir, he said. There's movement. Not an attack. Not yet. But they know she's awake. Amara felt the weight of those words settle over her. Enemies she had never chosen. A life she had never imagined. She looked down at her hand again, at the ring that marked her as seen in a world where visibility was dangerous. Then she looked back at Jun-suk Kong, the man who had bound her to his world in the name of protection. I won't be your weakness, she said quietly. Something fierce lit in his eyes. I know, he replied. You're the reason they'll think twice. Amara leaned back against the pillows, pain flaring but resolve steadying. She had survived worse than this. She always had. But as the city beyond the hospital continued to watch and wait, one truth became impossible to ignore. The woman who had lived unseen was gone. And the world that had noticed her would not let her go without a fight.